always tell people the weight will take care of itself when you focus on your healthy habits, you focus on your fitness. So many people focus too much on the weight and on the scale.
Welcome to the Spartan DEKA series on Spartan Up with Jarod Cogswell, Director of Sport, and Yancy Culp, Director of Programming.
Okay, team, over the course of the next 2 episodes, we had Amy Culp on, my wife, arguably one of the most well-respected registered dietitians walking the planet. In these 2 episodes, we talked about sports performance nutrition. We talked about COVID and nutrition. We talked about eating disorders. We talked about family nutrition, the importance of getting the kiddos involved in the kitchen. We talked about weight loss. We covered every single aspect of nutrition, listening to one of the most well-respected individuals in the field of nutrition. Stay tuned. These 2 episodes freaking rock.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Junk, the official headband of Spartan Pros. Junk produces the best headband, guaranteed to work as hard as you do. Visit junkbrands.com/Spartan for 10% off your order.
What's up, Spartans? Welcome to the DEKA series on the Spartan Up podcast. I'm your co-host, Jarod Cogswell, along with my brother, Yancy Culp. And I'll tell you what, team, we got a special one today. We have a special guest. We're going to dig deep with this guest. And you know what? I'm glad that we have separate screens because I got a feeling that my brother, Yancy Culp, he'd actually have a hard time keeping his hands off of this one, this special guest. He's got a crush on this guest for sure. We're talking about Amy Culp, okay? And Amy's got a lot of letters behind her name, but just to give you a little bit of a rundown, this is actually a bulleted list from Yancy, and it could have went on for 45 minutes. But here's the gist, okay? She's been at the University of Texas, okay? She's the Assistant Athletics Director, Performance Nutrition, and Clinical Wellness for the Texas Longhorns Athletics Department. Texas Longhorns, guys, come on. That's legendary right there. Number 2, she's also the president of the Collegiate and Professional Sports Dietetics Association, okay? We've got somebody super credible on today's show. Okay? And then last but not least, she also has her own private practice that has a focus on eating disorders, family nutrition, sports performance, and so much more. And I know Yancy's gotta, you know, I gotta give him a little bit of props on this one. There's 2 things that Yancy brags about, right? He brags about Texas, talks about Texas all the time, and he's always bragging about his beautiful wife and really the nuts and bolts of the Culp family, Amy Culp. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What a sweet, warm welcome. Yeah, I am definitely privileged to have an amazing, fun job. You know, definitely in my dream job. I can talk a little bit about what got me here, but my best job, obviously, is being Yancy's wife and Lillian Scout's mom. It's the best job in the whole wide world. So thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk nutrition.
I'm glad to have you here. This is going to be fun. So let's get the conversation going. And Yancy's got a big old smile already. He's so proud.
My cheeks going to be hurting all day today and tomorrow after this one. JC loves when I say this. As old fitness coaches, we've been doing it for 55 plus years, combined years. As a fitness coach who is passionately in love with serving people through fitness, helping them learn about living a life fueled by fitness. You can't imagine, all fit coaches out there, you can't imagine the benefit of living with a registered dietitian for so many wonderful years. I feel like I kind of you basically kind of get like this well-rounded, at least kind of a high school level, education in nutrition, that there's so much that I've leaned on. And as a fit pro, when you work, we rely on, or we should rely on, Amy and I talk about this a lot, as we do a good job motivating people to work fitness into their life. And then sometimes we lean on professionals. If that's a physical therapist, or if that's, in this case, a registered dietitian, I lean in on her so heavily. And I am a better fitness coach. And I have always been a better fitness coach because I am able, and this is a little hard for us fit coaches to admit, but about nutrition is about 60-70% of the equation, folks. That's real hard for us coaches to admit, but it is actually, the teeter-totter is swayed to where the nutrition is a massive piece of the overall equation of living a life fueled by fitness and nutrition in this case.
Yeah,
so,
and I don't know that you've always, you may not, may have been times in the journey where you didn't necessarily feel like it was a benefit, right? As I'm going through my journey of sort of learning how to best serve people, we've had a lot of debates back and forth on how you do that, how you best serve people. And even with just sort of raising our healthy, intuitive eating kids, how to do that in the world that we live in, because I often, I say all the time, like, nutrition's so hard because everybody eats, like every single person in the whole wide world eats, right? Not everyone works out. Not everyone goes to physical therapy. Not everyone is looking for advice about their mental health. Not everyone is looking, not everyone's on sort of every piece of the wellness journey all the time. Everyone sort of has their opinions, yes, about, medical things, but still tend to, go to the doctors for that advice. But literally every single person eats, and therefore they're making some sort of decision throughout their day about how they should do that. And those decisions a lot of times are informed by who they listen to, what they read, what they're informed by. The hard part about nutrition, Yancy always says, and I'm going to try really hard to say Yancy because I call him something different. So I'm going to...
You can say that.
Yank always says, like, you have to be living under a rock to not understand something about nutrition. And while that's true, it's still just so complicated and nuanced. And so the problem, though, is that so many people take that and, again, have their opinion, have their platform, but don't necessarily have the right understanding about a relationship with food and how to change that relationship with food and nutrition as a behavior. Your relationship with food a lot of times most of the time is about your behaviors and your habits. And so I often tell people, like, I could easily sort of just write a meal plan for anyone, or you could go online and get a meal plan, but it's learning why you eat, what you eat, when you eat it, and what those behaviors are behind that. That's so important. And so you and I have sort of had that journey all along the way as you're trying to learn to help people. And so many times people are very well intentioned about giving advice and don't realize that it can actually be more harmful than it is helpful. And when I was starting out in private practice, I would tell people, if you're trying to limit what you're hearing about nutrition, just don't open some of those magazines, and don't sort of seek out that advice. We'll focus on what's right for you in our sessions together. Now it's so much harder to sort of quiet the noise because it's everywhere. It's all over social media. It's all over everywhere all the time. And it takes something that should be simple and an individualized approach, simple as in like simple yet nuanced, and an individualized approach. It makes it really confusing because there's no one perfect approach for every person. And again, because there's so many people, everybody eats, people have opinions, they have thoughts, they read certain things. And so it's like, who is the expert? Who should I go to? Who should I trust in this information? And so figuring out the best way to help fitness coaches, to help strength coaches, to help athletic trainers, to help all the people in my the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis on how do we help people make those behavior changes, because it is so important for performance. It's so important for long-term health. You don't want to be somebody who's a fitness coach who just is like, I can never talk about nutrition. I'm a robot. Only dietitians can talk about nutrition. That's not necessarily ever my message either. So it's like helping you figure out how you can best serve the athletes that you work with and the clients that you work out with, but not to hurt them and not to harm them. And I think that's, that's kind of definitely a big part of my passion with nutrition is how to help people have a healthy relationship with food and understand nutrition, not being fearful about eating, but also living a life that's fueled by fitness and fueled by healthy eating, and how that can really be fun. And I believe that starts in the kitchen and learning all about nutrition and how delicious healthy food can be, and how much better you can feel when you start to make small, simple changes, and it doesn't have to be super drastic.
Love it. We've got a question that's obviously very relevant right now with COVID, and this is pretty much something that nobody's arguing with is we're seeing that obesity and unhealthy habits is playing a larger role in the hospitalizations, the ICUs, and even deaths. The RD community as a whole, what is the best messaging? What message are your teams compiling to say this is how we need to help tackle this?
I think the first thing to think about, again, is to not, if you're somebody who is in a larger body right now or really struggling to make nutrition changes because you have these habits that you feel like are contributing to your health in a negative way, I think the first thing is to not be fearful and to start with where you are. And to do an assessment with where you are with your relationship with food and with your nutrition. And again, to not feel like it has to be drastic. Really focusing on that the goal is to be as healthful as possible at the size that you are and continue to work towards that goal of being as healthy as possible at the size that you are. And I always tell people the weight will take care of itself when you focus on your healthy habits, you focus on your fitness. So many people focus too much on the weight and on the scale. Mm-hmm. While that can be something that can be some structure that can be helpful to people is to monitor that over time. For a lot of people, it's more frustrating because it's not a linear thing that happens. Weight loss is not a linear thing that happens. And instead focusing on if the weight doesn't change, what is my job? What is my goal right now today to help to contribute to my overall health and wellness? What are those steps that I can take today to improve my health? And I think the bigger message for that risk is don't live in that fear and shame with the messaging that's coming out of what we know. We already know that like those healthy habits for a long, healthy life are important. And so starting with where you are and knowing that foundation of health is something that you can have, again, sort of, I'm going to use this word lightly. You can have control over. We can't control everything, but we can be aware of what our habits are and why we're choosing what we're eating and when we're eating it and why and what our challenges are, because everybody's journey is going to look a little bit different. So starting with where you are, knowing that like, okay, I want to decrease my risk for long-term health, negative consequences in my long-term health because of my behaviors. And I'm going to do that starting today. And maybe that means that I need to, move my body for 20 minutes and I need to focus on, I would oftentimes help people focus on what to eat versus what not to eat. So filling up their plate with the foods that are going to be healthful and nutritious and talking through the benefits of those, not in a vacuum, right? I think a lot of times people will take, this food is high in vitamin D, so I need to make sure I have this food every single day. The beautiful thing about food is that we get to eat a variety of foods and those nutrients work synergistically together over time. We don't have to eat perfectly one day. We don't have to eat perfectly in one meal. It exists over a continuum over time. And so focusing on maybe this week, our goal is to get in more fruits and vegetables. And when you do that, you start to feel more full and you start to maybe eat less of the more processed grains on that plate because you're feeling more full from the fruits and vegetables. And then you're also getting the benefit from the nutrients in those fruits and vegetables and the protection of the antioxidants and the phytochemicals. And so again, it's not only, it's focusing a little bit more on the foods to put on your plate and the benefits of those, and then also how those then help you to feel full and to feel satisfied and stabilize blood sugar. And of course, all those beautiful things that great balanced nutrition can do for you. But so many people focus on sort of rules and very rigid plans that can certainly work for a short period of time. But what we know to be true from long-term data is that, number one, there's no magic bullet. And I say all the time jokingly, but sort of true. If there was, a perfect plan, I would have already written the diet book and we would live on a beach in Hawaii for the rest of our lives because I would be a millionaire or a billionaire, right? If there was one perfect supplement you could take that could be sort of the magic bullet. I would have created it. It's not. It's those hard habits, right? Those more challenging habits that you have to develop over time. So those more quick fixes, people are doing things like cleanses and all kinds of stuff right now, the first part of the year. I often say that really the biggest benefit maybe of those they can help to uncover what your habits are that are getting in the way. It's not that rigid plan or that cleanse. I mean, your body has a perfect ability to cleanse itself. It's called your digestive system, your liver, your kidneys. If those are all functioning, your body is detoxing every day. And it's working to detox your body and to stabilize everything. However, if something like that you do for a short period of time, it's helping you to uncover, wow, my habit is to really when I get home from work, I crush food because I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm anxious, I'm having to transition from being at work to being at home life. And I've noticed that that's my habit. Great, but that's not the plan. The plan isn't the thing that helped you. What helped you is identifying the habit that's getting in the way for you. So really getting off of the, that there's one perfect diet or plan that's going to work. And the other thing that's important to know too is that, again, people can respond differently to different plans based on your gender, based on your physiology, based on your genetics, based on et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why it is important to work with the dietitian, because they're educated on helping you to identify that for yourself. Whereas some people might benefit from intermittent fasting for a short period of time. For other people, that might be more pro-inflammatory and not helpful for them. So remembering sort of those things as you're starting your journey. One is to start in a place with where you are. And that's what I always do with all of the athletes that I work with. I first do an assessment of what are their habits? Where are they? What is their knowledge about nutrition? What's important to them? Because you have to have two things to change. You have to have the knowledge to know how to do it. That's my job, right? Is to teach about the knowledge of nutrition based on truth, evidence-based. But you also, it has to be important to you. And so you have to find out what is your why. And again, it has to be something a little bit more than the scale.
I love that you said that, Amy, because we talk about even on the fitness side, you have to have a purpose to fitness. It can't just be about the scale and what that's going to say. It's been proven that that's not enough for sustainable motivation, right?
Yeah.
We'll be right back to this interview, but first, a little bit from today's sponsor, Junk Headbands. Their headbands are the official headband of Spartan Pros. They produce a headband guaranteed to work just as hard as you do to keep the sweat and the mud out of your eyes. They are UPF 50 sun protection, they're made in the USA, they're easy to clean, and they won't fade. So wear the headband of the Spartan Pros. Go to junkbrands.com/Spartan to save 10% off your order.
And, we're talking mostly, especially on the COVID side of this unhealthy behavior. And we're talking about one bookend on one side of the fitness spectrum, those people that are struggling with weight loss or their health in general. You work with also a lot of athletes, high caliber athletes. I think when we talk about the word sports performance or human performance, what I think there's a misinterpretation with that word performance. I think a lot of people, the general audience out there, thinks about human performance meaning, oh, well, that's for the athletes, right? Well, human performance is how am I going to perform today as a dad, as a friend, as a husband, as an employee, as a business owner, whatever you do. And, I think when it comes to nutrition, a lot of people don't understand. It's we have a responsibility to perform as a human being and take this gift that we've been given and perform at a high level every single day, and
Absolutely.
And so you use this phrase quite a bit, that food is fuel. And what I love about that is it kind of creates a different mindset about the approach to food. Can you explain that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a mindset, right? And so you're right. I work with the best athletes in the country, right? The most elite, the most highly recruited athletes in the country come to Texas to perform. And so the way I sort of talk, but they're still 18 to 22-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the most highly recruited athletes in the country, which means they're coming to us right out of high school with the habits that they have at that time. And sometimes it's like, well, my way I was eating before is kind of working for me now. I'm really skilled at what I do. Why should I make any changes? And that's kind of where what you're alluding to as well, is people are like, well, I'm fine. Why do I need to worry about it? For me to serve my athletes at the highest level, I need to be taking care of the machine that I am running on. And that is my sustained energy levels. That's my brain functioning. That's my rest and recovery. That's my longevity. And so when I talk about food as fuel with the athletes that I work with, it is really just changing that mindset from instant gratification. Food is delicious. Absolutely. It's yummy. But what I say a lot of times is like, not every, and I say this to our kids at home, not every time that we eat is going to be our most favorite meal or a party, right? So sometimes it is the function of that meal. So if you're looking for a snack in your day and it's midday and you're sort of having that midday slump and low energy, looking at how fuel and food can help to stabilize that for you. So instead of grabbing a cup of coffee and putting, sugar and cream in it, which might give you a little bit of jump and a spike in your blood sugar, it's going to also make you crash back down. So knowing that the fuel that you provide, you can actually help to slowly raise it and stabilize it out. And that fuel is also going to give you nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants to help to continue sort of that longevity, that performance, and that recovery long term. So a lot of times we'll talk about, but there is still a place for some fun, because if you become someone who's so focused on just the nutrients and, I do spend a lot of time talking also with athletes on the other end of the spectrum where they've become so focused on, okay, I can only eat when it's fuel. And if it's not fuel and it's not nutritious, then I shouldn't be eating it. Right. So it's like, we can be on either end of the spectrum. I talk about like where there's absolutely no regard to nutrition. You're not thinking about the nutrition and how it's going to benefit you when you're making your nutrition, when you're making your food choices, and you don't plan ahead, right? So you get hungry and you find food that's going to be tasty to eat, tastes good, and I enjoy it. So those are sort of like the only thing that's informing that decision. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of time and consideration and planning, and it gets in the way of your life, and you can't go out to eat with people, and you have a lot of stress about your food, and you have a lot of anxiety about it. If it doesn't, every single thing doesn't provide some sort of nutritional value that provides a lot of anxiety, and it gets in the way of the joy of your life, right? So those are two ends of the spectrum. So how can you live that high performance life? The beautiful thing is what I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be perfect every day. We can have that 80-20, right? 80% of the time we're thinking about fuel, we're preparing, we're thinking about our day. Am I going to have time to cook today? Am I going to need to bring something with me? Am I going out to a restaurant later on? So that I need to think about what I'm going to, have there so I can get my nutritious food in. So thinking about it and planning, preparing 80% of the time allows for 20% fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. There is that 20% fun. What that looks like practically is the harder part. Most people will say moderation. You just have to moderate. You have to do 80-20. Well, how does that actually look? And how does that play out in your life, right? Does that look like a little something fun every day? Does that look like a little something fun on the weekends? What does that look like from a practical perspective is the thing that I sort of sit down and talk with people on a daily basis. And if they're way off, let's say they're 20-80 the other way, I'm not going to swing them completely 80-20. We're going to start working our way towards that goal of 80-20. They're going to start to feel the difference, whether that's they're sleeping better, they're not as sore, they're making changes in their body composition, they have more energy throughout the day. That bringing it back to what's important to them that I found out in that first consultation. Oh, what's important to you is that, that you're, that you're starting. And so how is this helping the coaches to recognize that you're ready to get back onto the field or the track sooner than other people? So driving the food choices back to what's important to you. So just changing the mindset as food, as fuel. We talk about that with our kids all the time. I think starting from a young age is important because I see a lot of people that their parents didn't really challenge, I mean, whenever your kids are really young, they just want what they want. They want the shoes that they want to wear and they want the food that they want to eat, right? And so our job is, okay, well, those are sandals. You can't wear sandals when there's snow outside. You have to wear boots. Our job is also, okay, I know that you want to eat, Cheerios for every meal and mac and cheese for every meal, but my job is to provide you with the nutritious foods. Your job is to eat those foods and to provide that variety over time. And that goes to the same for people who are looking to make nutritious changes. It's hard. Behavior change is hard. We know that from fitness. We know that from nutrition. It can take up to 20 to 30 times of trying a new food before it is even not gross anymore to for people when they're trying new foods. And so not giving up when you're trying to change that mindset, because it can be pretty frustrating when you're sort of trying to change and not trying to change too much at one time. So again, in consultations with people, again, if they're sort of on that spectrum somewhere, I assess where that is, and we pick one or two simple things and we do that consistently over time, and then we stack that habit with another, and then we stack that habit with another until it becomes more what they do, that new habit for them.
Such a beautiful segue. And there were some mic drops in there, JC. That whole 80-20, don't swing it back the other way, that's a mic drop for everybody out there listening. At least it is for me as a fitness coach. I use it a lot.
Yancy always calls the mic drops.
Yeah, call the mic. We're going to have a couple. We've already had a couple.
Know that was a mic drop.
This was a beautiful segue, Amy, into a subject that I know you are very passionate about. I've lived with you for a long time, and we are right in the middle of our most important job in life, and that's raising kiddos from 0 to 18. You have and you talk a lot about. I'm going to start this off with the fact that you talk a lot about triggers, and you've taught me a lot about triggers. You've spent extensive time serving the eating disorder world. Anybody dealing with that? Kind of on the other side of the bookend is the obesity, unhealthy habits, overweight, and there's a lot in between. Talk to us about the importance of that job, and give us some good guardrails, healthy guardrails as parents to avoid the triggers that could have those kiddos while they're in the house or when they leave the house develop some very bad habits, but also keep them in, if we're talking about unhealthy habits and not gaining a ton of unhealthy weight and all these things, guide us here as parents and viewers listening to this episode.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember is that disordered eating and eating disorders can certainly exist on a continuum. And what I see, and while I treated eating disorders, mostly eating disorders and sports nutrition in my private practice that I had for 10 years, and certainly saw sort of very clinical cases that, were diagnosed eating disorders that I was helping people hopefully recover from. And it was very rewarding work. At the same time, there's a lot of disordered eating I think that people have to be aware of. And dieting is, sort of the number one trigger for that for people. Not everyone who diets is going to develop an eating disorder, but most eating disorders are developed after doing a dieting behavior because it's triggering for them. And so I often tell my friends, and I would tell parents when I was in private practice, if my child says that they want to go on a diet, that is going to be as much of a at-risk behavior for me as if they say they want to, do other very risky behaviors. I'm not going to try to do any comparisons. But my red flags would go off because that's very risky behavior for adolescents, middle school age children, high school kids. It's not uncommon. And we know why it's not uncommon, right? Because again, it's everywhere. And while I'm not somebody who is going to say you should never be motivated to want to lose weight or try to change your body composition, I'm not saying that can't be sort of a healthy behavior that you want to have as an adult. Or even potentially for a high school kid, middle school age kid, I would want to do a lot of exploring around that. But I would say what is not helpful for us is a lot of the diet culture behavior and messaging that's out there. And so I think as parents, one of the things that's very important to talk with your kids, just like you talk with your kids about any other risk behavior, is when you hear sort of more triggering or more unhealthy behaviors being talked about in diet culture, you talk about that with your kids. Like, that's not really based on truth. Let's talk through that. Like, what does that mean? Like, there aren't really good and bad foods, but what does that really mean for your body? And how do we make those choices? But to go back to your original question, what should parents do to help kids to develop healthy relationship with food, and a healthy relationship, I would say, with the body image as well? First and foremost is to really be incredibly careful about what you say about yourself and other people as it relates to weight and nutrition, and being very careful when you're not tie any judgments to that, because they are listening and they're watching. And so the first and most important thing you can do would be to have a healthy relationship with food and your body image yourself. Okay, let's say you're somebody who's wanting to change your weight and you're wanting, you've gained a little bit of weight during COVID. Am I saying that you absolutely can't, if you develop some unhealthy habits and you're trying to change that and that results in weight loss, that's unhealthy in your family? No, it's how you talk about it and what you connect it to. Okay. And the habits that you have. So the best and healthiest thing that you can do is to show your kids what healthy habits look like. So avoiding fad diets and avoiding restrictive eating patterns, and, making separate food for yourself than you make with your kids. Think about what a confusing message that is for kids. If you make different food for yourself than you do for them, your portion sizes might look different. What you need does look different than a growing child. But if you completely make something different, like, that's a very confusing message. And then talking them through sort of, again, what that moderation looks like. So what that looks like in our household, in our pantry, is you're going to open up the pantry, you're going to see fun food in there. I don't think we have any Oreos now, but most of the time you might open up the pantry and you're going to see something like that in there. But we also talk to our kids about when they're grabbing for that, because of course they're going to want to grab for the fun food first. Have you had any fruits and vegetables today? Have you had any calcium-rich foods today? Have you had any protein? When they're balancing out their plate, talking them through about what the balanced plate looks like and what all the different food groups are and how those nourish their bodies and why they need all those different food groups. And I know that you don't like, Scout doesn't like squash. I know you don't like squash, but that's the vegetable that we're having tonight. And you're going to have that vegetable tonight. And I think what it boils down to is a parent's job is to bring in the healthful foods and the healthful behaviors. It's the kid's job to determine how much to eat and whether they're going to eat. And then providing those regular meals and snacks throughout the day, so that you're showing them how to structure their food throughout the day.
Super quick follow-up, as I know we've both cringed, and we graciously cringe and try to coach families, but you brought up that the harms of cooking separate meals for your kids. It's like, we're having this meal, but they don't like most of this. We're going to do this separate. I want you to do a little deeper dive on that, because we do see, even in our circle, a lot of families doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's very challenging for sure. And it can go one way. Like, it can go that the parents are making something different for themselves than they are for their kids because they're on some sort of diet, or it can be that kid is on what I call a food jag, but it's called in research a food jag, and they're only liking the sort of those types of foods. And so they feel like I want them to eat something. As a parent, like, there's nothing more honestly satisfying at a meal whenever you see your kid is like eating and they're eating enough. Like, there's something to that. It's like, oh, yes, I won the day. My kid is eating and they're eating adequately. So as a parent, sometimes people can fall into the like, I'm just going to give them something so they eat. They're not going to eat that. So I'm just going to make something they will eat. The problem is that then they're developing picky eating habits that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. The habits that you develop at a young age are the habits that you're going to have for the rest of your life. And so if you only eat the foods that are your most favorite foods, then that's going to be what you continue to eat for the rest of your life. There certainly can be situations where kids might need some occupational therapy or need some help, through different texture issues or challenges. But sometimes it might just be sort of that picky eating that you kind of have to battle through. And that might mean that you continually put that food on their plate and you encourage them to just take a couple of bites and you talk through it, but you don't give up. And that's the hard part about being a parent. But that's reflected in everything that we do, right? From discipline to fighting siblings to all the things that you do. You have that consistent message and you don't change even when it's hard. And so I think it is bringing in that healthful food, teaching them how to cook, teaching them where their food comes from, getting them involved can be a way to help them with the picky eating, but not giving up.
Amy, I get the opportunity to hang with the Culps over the next few nights for DEKA Fit Austin, and I'm looking forward to hanging with you guys, of course.
Same.
I just have one request. If we have dinner together, can we not have squash?
You and Scout both don't want squash. Well, you're lucky. It's the winter, so there's not a lot of summer squash around.
Good.
Okay, team, hope you enjoyed this first episode. Make sure you tune in for episode 2, where we do a deep dive in more awesome nutrition topics.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Spartan Up. Do you want to be ready for anything? Download Joe's free ebook at spartan.com/readyforanything. Do you know someone who needs a little help staying motivated, staying informed, getting or staying mentally and physically resilient? We're here 3 days every week with a mix of content to help you stay strong, from mindset to nutrition and everything in between. Listen every Tuesday to hear Joe DeSena, Spartan Race founder and CEO, and the rest of the week, join us for DEKA, Endurance, and Classic episodes. See you next time. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Junk, the official headband of Spartan Pros. Junk produces the best headband, guaranteed to work as hard as you do. Visit junkbrands.com/Spartan for 10% off your order.
I know we're officially wrapped up with this episode, but one important topic, and I'm going to say I can kind of speak for my wife here. She's not on, but she would be okay with what I'm about to say. We forgot to talk about the word cheat. So many of you out there, fitness coaches, just people in general, you can say, well, I don't want to eat that cheat. That's a cheat meal. That's a cheat food, or it's a cheat day. And our family, and my wife, she pounds this drum all the time. You throw that damn cheat word out. You're never cheating. 80-90% of the time, we need to get it right. We need to fuel the beautiful machine in a healthy way. Food is fuel, as Amy mentioned. Every now and then, if you go to a party or whatever, you enjoy a fun food. That's what you call it. It's not a cheat day, cheat meal, cheat food. It's a fun party, and I'm going to celebrate with maybe a piece of pizza, or maybe it's a beer, or maybe it's a cupcake at a birthday party, or whatever celebration. You don't beat yourself up over it. It's not freaking cheating. Listening, it's not cheating. You're just going to have I'm going to have a fun couple hours. That's what we do. Rock and roll.